Thank you for joining us at the Evolution of Medicine Summit. A warm welcome. We wanted to make a specific thank you to our sponsors that have made this event possible. Energetics, an innovative natural remedy and supplement company, is committed to revitalizing medicine, and Cyrex Labs, a clinical immunology laboratory specializing in functional immunology and autoimmunity. Most of all, thank you for listening. If you'd like to share this with your colleagues and friends on Facebook if you enjoy the content, and if you have questions, you can ask us on Twitter with the hashtag EvoMed. Finally, if you really want to play your part in accelerating the evolution of medicine, ask your doctor if the Evolution of Medicine Summit might be right for them. Thank you and enjoy. Hello and welcome back to the Evolution of Medicine World Summit. This is James Maskell, your host, and I have the distinct pleasure today of welcoming one of my favorite doctors who's really been with us and a big supporter of the vision and what we've been doing for the last few years, Dr. Alejandra Carrasco, all the way from Austin, Texas. Dr. Carrasco, great to have you here today.
Thank you so much, James. I'm so happy to be here with you.
So if you don't recognize Dr. Carrasco's voice, it's probably because you haven't been listening in to the Spanish translation of the summit earlier in the year when I was at South by Southwest in Austin. Dr. Carrasco and I were talking about different ways to get this more information out to more people, and we looked at doing the Spanish translation. Dr. Carrasco is bilingual, and I really appreciate you doing that, Dr. Carrasco. It's really made a big difference and allowing this great information to get to so many more people. So thank you.
Absolutely, it's a great pleasure and honor, and definitely I love speaking Spanish and English, so it's a wonderful opportunity for me as well.
Awesome. So, today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how we're in the pediatric section. I know this is something that you're, really passionate about. We were talking about how to create sustainable change. Now, I know that you're not a pediatrician, and that was a very specific choice on your journey. So maybe for the people at home who have not come across your work before, you could just sort of give a sort of an intro on why you're not a pediatrician, why you chose to be a family physician, and how that's set up for what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. So when I was in college, I guess to begin with, I wanted to be a doctor from a very, very young age, and I'm the first doctor in my family. So it was something that was just kind of in me. I can't explain it. And I was always very drawn to children, and I thought, I think that I want to be a pediatrician. So forever, growing up, people would say, what do you want to do when you want to grow up? And I'd say, I want to be a pediatrician. I just love children, connect very much with them. And I thought that that'd be just a really fun way to practice medicine. And I decided, really in college, I started having this different idea about medicine and the role that I wanted to play in it. And basically what I found is that even though I loved, the interaction with children, what I found more powerful and more compelling was the interaction with children within a family. And so as I went through the process of, going through university and then going into medical school and choosing my specialty, I actually chose family medicine because I just felt like it was a much more intentional and powerful way for me personally to connect with the whole family unit. And I think that one of the best ways to affect change is within the family unit. So that's why I went into family medicine, so that I could be able to take care of everyone within the family and understand kind of everyone's position and situation and scenario and help them all work together to affect change.
That's great. Well, I know not all doctors sort of think about their job in that way at all, but you also, practice a certain brand of functional and integrative medicine now within your practice, Nourish Medicine. What was the journey that sort of led you to have this different type of practice?
Well, I will also say that it's been quite a long journey, but I think probably back in the university when I started learning about kind of different cultures and different methods of healing, I kind of had this realization that, Western medicine wasn't the end all be all. While very much a very powerful tool, I started learning about, Eastern medicine or indigenous medicine, and I became very interested in integrative medicine. And so I think in college I read Spontaneous Healing by Andrew Weil. And that really kind of changed my paradigm. And from that point forward, I just sought out as much information as possible about alternative medicine. And through my medical school career, I took every opportunity possible to learn about different modalities of healing. And it was within my own personal journey in medical school that when I personally became very ill during my third year of medical school, kind of everything fell apart. I'd been on this, kind of accomplishment track for so long in my life that I think I just reached a breaking point, because it was right around the time where I was in the hospital seeing patients, working 80 hours a week and studying at night, and, everything just kind of fell apart. So I spent a couple of years trying to figure out how I could get better. And I went and had CAT scans and EKGs and, blood tests, and no one could figure out kind of what my issue was. And at the end of medical school, right after I graduated, I actually went to a conference and I heard Mark Hyman speak, and he spoke about the gluten connection and how gluten can cause all sorts of problems in the body. And it really rocked my world. And so then I did an elimination diet, and a lot of things changed for me, and I got much better. And that's how I got into functional medicine. And before that, I had studied some with Andrew Weil and done some rotations in New York at Beth Israel and at the Center for Healing at Beth Israel. So that's my journey and how I kind of decided that I wanted to be in this world, because it's very powerful.
Yeah, that's great. That's obviously a story that we've heard a number of times from different people, their own personal journey sort of leading to a better understanding of themselves, and then, sort of a greater understanding of their family and also the other health issues on there. So now that you have your practice and now that you're sort of practicing the way that you want, just for the people at home, and maybe there's doctors listening too, to sort of explain, what your life looks like now, what your practice looks like, and sort of some of the principles that Nourish Medicine is built on.
Absolutely. So about 2 years ago is when my practice opened, a little over 2 years ago. But before that, I had always kind of had in mind that I wanted to have a small micro practice. I finished residency, got my board certification in family medicine, and then I just started practicing urgent care for a couple of years, and quickly burned out just because I didn't feel like my heart was in it, honestly, because, it was a lot about the numbers and about, kind of people come in feeling sick and, they just want their antibiotic, and there wasn't really kind of the space to explain to people and to families, because a lot of families would come in together, how maybe that wasn't the right decision. And so within that time period, I actually listened to a course, Heal Thy Practice. I actually listened to the audio, and that's actually how I became really inspired and empowered enough to start my practice. I heard Jeff Glad speak, and I heard James actually speak as well. And I came up with an idea of how to create the practice that I had always dreamed of creating, and also how to create balance in my life. So I created a micro practice that's very, very small. I have one employee and myself, and I practice out of a very simple space. But I am able to, I work part-time, and then I also have 2 beautiful children, so I spend a lot of time with my family. But I'm able to see, patients for a very, very long period of time. I see them for an hour to an hour and a half per visit, and we go very, very deep, into all of their issues. And it's been a very transformative journey for me. I absolutely have an integrative and functional medicine practice, that I would, just say that includes looking at the whole person, looking at every aspect of their life, from their beliefs about themselves to the food that they eat to, looking at their symptoms kind of in a functional medicine lens as well. And then, also because I'm Western trained, using Western medicine when is necessary, but, kind of using the fusion of all those things together. And it's been wonderful.
That's great. So can you give an example, sort of practical example for someone who maybe has never seen a doctor like this, of a case where, potentially if the patient had gone the other route, would have got their 7 minutes, would have, had a drug and it wouldn't have ended the problem, versus what you've been able to do when you've had a 60 or a 90-minute window to be able to really drill down into people's issues. Can you sort of give a practical example for someone at home? Because it sounds great, and I'm sure people would love that, but they, just to give an idea of what you can catch that might get missed in the other system.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and every patient is an individual. And so every case is different. But, for example, I took care of a 13-year-old girl soon after I started my practice who had recently been diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And she, was bleeding profusely out of her rectum and had a lot of pain in her gut and in her joints, was completely fatigued and very, very ill. And she'd gone to see the pediatric gastroenterologist. And the first thing he said when he walked into the room to see her and her family was, well, you don't really need a colon to live anyway. So, you have ulcerative colitis and we're probably going to have to take your colon out, but you don't really need it anyhow. And my poor patient and her family were just horrified and shocked and, just completely dismayed that, their specialist would treat them this way and would tell her like, you don't need your colon. Well, I mean, she wants her colon and, well, of course she did. And so they tried to talk to him about, are there other things that we can do, aside from medication and surgery? And is there anything I could change in my lifestyle? No, there's nothing proven. This is a chronic illness. It's very severe, so we need to kind of take the next steps and get you prepared to get a colon resection. So in that time, they came and saw me, and I took a very in-depth history. This is a family that had traveled a lot. They had been traveling every summer since the child was 2 to remote parts of the world, and got a diet history, family history, went very in depth in the stress piece, and it was very multifactorial. So it turned out that this child not only was very stressed out because she was in a really competitive ballet program, and every time that she went to her ballet class, she was told that she needed to stand straighter, or that she wasn't holding her leg in the right position, and her stomach just ached and burned every time that she went to these classes 4 times a week. And then, through testing, we actually found that she had a parasite, and we actually found that she had several food sensitivities, including egg, wheat, and even celery. So we did an elimination diet, took her off a lot of the foods that are inflammatory and also the ones that showed up positive on her testing, put her on a gut healing regimen, started doing some stress management work, and treated her for her parasite, and she got better. And 2 years later, she's thriving, she's growing, she doesn't have joint pain anymore, she's not bleeding from her rectum, she still has her colon, and she's better than ever.
That's amazing. It rings really true to me, Alex, because I had friends growing up in England. I got one guy I'm thinking of particularly who had ulcerative colitis and, now has 3 feet less, intestines than he used to have. And it just seems like, I don't know, and when we're talking about the evolution of medicine, that just seems to be one example where we'll look back in a few years and just be like, that was unbelievably barbaric to think that there was no way to be able to, when the lining of the integrity of the lining, when the lining's redeveloping and regrowing every however many days, to think that we had no other option but to cut it out just seems like, it's not an evolved medicine, but let's put it that way. And it seems like what you're talking about is a lot more of an evolved strategy, working with the healing power of the body to be able to put it back together.
Absolutely. And it's just even that so many of us in medicine, in traditional Western medicine, can't even think beyond the paradigm that we've been taught. Why can't we just say, well, let's give your body a little bit of time, let's try these different things, instead of like, nope, no, there's only one way, I gotta take that out, and that's just how it's going to be. So
yeah. So, I mean, that's just one example of an autoimmune disease, and certainly autoimmune disease seems to be one type of disease that is really well treated by functional medicine. I know you've worked a lot with other types of things, lupus and those kind of things. I mean, do you feel like these types of diseases are well treated or well looked at by the functional strategies that you've learned through your other trainings?
Absolutely. I think that all of these are very multifactorial diseases, and I think they're also rooted in epigenetics. I mean, like everything. And I think that since epigenetics itself is such an emerging field, what I tell a lot of my patients is that, just because you say acquired, a polymorphism or a genetic, you have a genetic predisposition for a disease, that doesn't mean that you have to turn it on, or that doesn't mean that you can't turn it off.
Yeah.
So, but I think you've got to look at the whole person, and you've got to look at what their beliefs are about themselves, what their stress level is. Do they feel like they're being chased by a lion all day long? Are they really nourishing themselves? All of these things, play a huge role, of course.
Absolutely.
And it's just like we've forgotten that in the past few generations, it seems.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have so many talks throughout this summit, and if you're listening in Spanish, you will hear it through the lips of Dr. Carrasco. But, on some of these clinical areas, the immunology and autoimmunity and women's health and men's health and so forth. But I know that what you are really passionate about in talking about this case, and maybe this case is a great example of how when you're unraveling medicine and when you're unraveling cases like this and really getting to causative factors, how important it is for the family to be involved, not just the one patient. We've had this traditional medical model where it's one patient and one doctor, you're treating them, for their certain thing, and the family is not really necessarily involved. And so maybe you could just share with us sort of like where this concept came from, what results you've seen, and why you feel so passionately about the family being a really sustainable unit for significant change in healthcare.
Absolutely. I mean, I really believe that the family is one of the most powerful vehicles to evolve medicine. The family unit is basically a nest. And, within a nest, we can grow and be nurtured and be supported. And, when children, or families, whoever you live with or whoever supports you or whoever you're supported by, when people in your sphere become ill and some changes need to be made, the most powerful way to affect change, I believe, is to kind of go at it with them. For example, we often see the St. Baldrick's pictures that are very powerful, of little children with cancer that go through chemo, and then you see the mom and the dad shave their head and the siblings so that they can all kind of go through that process together, and so that individual can feel really supported and empowered and loved through a challenging process. And I think that, that kind of support should be translated also into the home and into the changes that you make. Say if you have, someone that is taking certain foods out of their diet, or, someone that, maybe is expressing an autoimmune disease and, needs to make some very, very significant changes in their lifestyle. The family as a nest can empower that person and can also empower themselves as a unit to all make healthy change together. And so I think that's kind of part of the reason that I went into family medicine to begin with. But, where I see a lot of this, the possibility and power, kind of emerging.
Yeah. It seems to me like the new paradigm is taking medicine into the home. Like if we're going to understand that there are causative factors to chronic disease like diet and stress and toxicity and immunity, and those causes are modifiable by patients at every moment, then we really need to find ways to consistently change that. So maybe you could just take us through a few examples of that. So let's say the dietary changes is one obvious one. You've had the girl with the ulcerative colitis. You've had other sort of families. It's not as acute as sort of a cancer issue where you all have to shave your head. So what does that look like when someone in the family needs to change their diet and the family are all working together on it? What does that look like from your experience? Because I'm sure when you're doing this with people, another great thing about having an hour or 90 minutes to work with them is that you can help them to sort of think through some of these things, right?
Right. And I think that what can be very overwhelming for people, especially moms, is how am I going to feed everyone? And, if my patient, say if the patient is the mother, or even if it's their child, if we do an elimination diet and say we find that certain foods don't work well with them, like gluten or dairy or eggs, or, or if we do IgG testing and something comes back positive, and I'm asking them to take certain foods out of their diet, it's really hard to do that 100% and to do that from a place of power when no one else in your family either understands what you're doing, respects what you're doing, or, is willing to take that journey with you. So a lot of my patients sometimes come back feeling a little bit disenfranchised when they're trying to make these positive changes that are hard, and then they have to cook like a different meal for the husband or for the kids because they still want to eat, they don't want to make the change. They still want to eat processed food, or they still want to eat, very inflammatory junk foods. It's so much more powerful when families come to me and they say, well, my whole family is supporting me in this journey, and we're all going to make the change, and we're all going to do this together. And, the person that, is manifesting symptoms, not only do they kind of benefit and often get better, but, you're also the changes that we talked about and that we make in my practice in general are things that probably most of us would benefit from anyway.
Yeah.
Just making kind of healthy changes to diet and to kind of consuming food and doing things to heal the gut. And
I can see so much value to that. I a few years ago, I went to go and see one of my clients up in Connecticut who was working with a family. He said, look, you've got to come and see the family, because it was mum and 7 kids. And they originally had changed the diet for one of the children who was on the autism spectrum. They changed the diet. They took out the inflammatory foods. They started doing some different remedies and that kind of thing. And it really improved. But what was really exciting was because they did it as a family, the other daughter's skin stuff and acne cleared up. The mum lost 40 pounds. The other kid was doing better in school. The grades were all going up. And there was this whole shift because they had only sort of made these changes for the benefit of the one child, thinking that the symptoms of the other children were just things that you had to deal with, and that yet suddenly when the changes were made, it had an impact on everyone. And then what was even more exciting than that is that other families at church or otherwise saw this family, like the one kid getting much better, the other kid improving, and then she was being asked by other parents, like, what are you doing? That to me is like, that is a mini engine in every zip code of sustainable change. And it sounds like that's sort of what you're advocating here.
Absolutely. I mean, it becomes a ripple effect.
Yeah, positive externalities is sort of the economic term for it. And I think we need as much of them as possible. So in this context, Alex, and you yourself as a mother, what role or what particularly important size of the role, or what particular responsibility comes down to the mother in this situation? Because typically the mother is 1, buying the food, 2, cooking the food, 3, responsible for the kids ultimately. Do you feel like the mother has sort of a more responsibility, or do you think it's the father to like actually change behavior? Because I'm pretty sure it's more often than not the dad who just still wants to eat pizza and that kind of thing. I mean, I'm a dad.
I would say that I would say that I do see that more often than not. But I just think that if whoever lives in your home can kind of get on board and make the changes together, then that's just going to be so much more effective and empowering for everyone in the house. And I do think that when it comes to raising children, whether or not people are, ill or having, dealing with any kind of chronic issues, basically if we choose to teach our children how to live a nourished life, what you do by by teaching them, these things, is that you set a really strong foundation for them so that, they grow up making kind of not only having, made really good kind of health choices throughout their life because the family kind of empowered them and structured their environment to do so. But then it's kind of rote in their system. They already know how to make those choices. They don't have to struggle so hard to make healthy choices. And I think that that's also how you propel kind of health. You kind of teach people the foundation. If the foundation is in place, then it'll be so much easier as they grow and go into the world, instead of having to kind of scramble around and figure out, should I be eating this? Should I be doing that? Should I be making this choice? Is this healthy for me? But if you have a very strong foundation, then, you're rooted very well.
Yeah. So let's take this practical for a mother who's listening now, or maybe anyone who's in the family. Maybe they have someone in the family that has a chronic autoimmune or just a sort of starting point of symptoms. It could be things that are medicated for or things that aren't medicated for. But let's just say there's someone in that situation. They just want to see whether diet's a factor. What's a sort of a you said to live a nourished lifestyle. What are some starting points for starting to do that, as far as, the practicalities of like buying groceries and planning meals and getting organized with kids' food at school, where, basically you can just get pizza and chips and there's a lot of crap at school. What's the sort of practicalities of doing this to engage this sort of thinking in a family unit?
Well, I think that, with food, if you kind of like Michael Pollan said it best, if your great-great-grandmother doesn't know what you're eating, then you shouldn't be eating it. So kind of really talks about taking those processed and packaged foods out of your diet, vegetable oils, things that really you can't find in nature. So I think that that's a very simple and powerful way to start. So I honestly think there's a lot of power in old school kind of wisdom. You kind of trying to make things from their most natural state. And I think that that's kind of where we should come from in cooking. As far as if you're trying to make healthy change in your life, pulling out inflammatory foods, pulling out some of the top inflammatory foods, of course, that would be processed food, refined sugars, high fructose corn syrup, coloring agents, all of the junky foods that are marketed to kids. And then I would also say, to go beyond that, things that also are very inflammatory are gluten, dairy, eggs can be inflammatory to some, soy. And then I would also say that choosing organic foods and non-genetically modified foods can be very powerful as well. We want to stay away from toxins, and if you're consuming neurotoxins and organophosphates through your conventionally grown food, and then you're eating Roundup Ready corn, then all of those things can play a role on our nervous system, and also wreak havoc on our gut and on our microbiome. So I would say that if you can keep it local, go to your farmer's market, support your local farmers that grow crops that are pesticide free. And then, try not eat out of boxes, then that's a very, very good place to start.
Yeah. How much value do you think there is in engaging the kids into where food comes from? Because I think one of the big things, like I've seen Jamie Oliver do, his success is really engaging kids as like, what is the basis of all of this food that you're eating? If it comes in a package, what did it start out as? And that seems to be, something that could be an educational moment through all of this, right?
Yes, absolutely. Grow a garden with your child, or, start a pot and grow, maybe grow some carrots, or grow some chard, or grow some onions, and, do the process as a family. Watch this food grow, and then eat it. And it's like a wondrous thing to really understand how nature provides for us. So I think that you're absolutely right. Teaching our children, kind of where it began and where it ended, and how it ended, and that whole process, that can be horrifying.
so many great parallels as well between what we need as a human to exist and what a plant needs to exist, and then thinking about it in that way as well. Like you wouldn't cover your plant in gas from the gas station. You have to give it what it needs to live, otherwise it dies pretty quickly. And in the same way, you can again draw a lot of parallels. I mean, I think that's huge on a number of levels. And I'm glad that you're sort of setting a stage to be able to communicate this, because I just see that, the ripple effects that we spoke about earlier, inside the family to all the members of the family, and then outside of the family, really makes a huge deal. Now, I also know the sort of counterbalance to this is the whole sort of, the sort of thing in culture now where people, mainstream is sort of complaining about the fact that people have these food allergies and can't eat what they used to be able to eat and those kind of things. Do you have some tips on like how to deal with those sort of situations where it's sort of not the done thing to not eat what's provided? Because I know that can be a source of stress for the kids and the mother and everyone involved.
Right. Yeah. You can feel kind of left out, or like that, that you're like that person that's always that can't eat anything. And honestly, I think, as time continues to go by, what we're going to find is more and more people have food sensitivities. And I think a lot of it has to do with, the changes in the way that we have grown our food, since the 90s, the introduction of genetically modified organisms, just the toxicity level on our planet. And of course, kind of leaky gut and in all the literature that's supporting kind of how this is, very much going to become a mainstream thing. And it really, I think, is going to be one of the more emerging things in the next 10 years in medicine. But I guess a couple things I just wanted to mention before I address, strategies. I would say that something that is very also wonderful that you can do with young children, even from the age of 18 months, is to get them involved in the cooking. My daughter is almost 4, and since she was, teeny tiny, I just got her to start helping me. And so we've made cooking kind of a family activity. It's something that we enjoy and that we do together. And that's a very empowering thing for children. And the other thing that I would say that is kind of a fun activity is to maybe encourage your kids to eat the rainbow, and, maybe even have them draw out a rainbow, and then see how many colors of the rainbow they can eat from fruits and vegetables a day, and maybe put a little sticker next to each color. And if they hit, maybe if they hit each color, 3 times a week, there's a reward. Or
that's a really interesting point with cooking. I see cooking as one really great area, and obviously you mentioned before gardening. I was just thinking about gardening actually as a tool to be able to deal with these more major causes of chronic disease. You obviously you're dealing with the diet because you're cooking the food and you're setting a great foundation. It's also very it can be very calming and stress reducing, and also the new research is showing that in order to improve the strength and depth of your microbiome, getting your hands into the dirt is really valuable. So it seems like this might be actually the healthiest thing that you could do.
And being outside in nature, getting the beautiful breeze and absorbing some vitamin D, and giving your eyes a break. I mean, it's honestly, if you can cook together, play together, run around outside together, those are very simple but profoundly impacting things that you can do as a family. It's not hard, but we've just forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely.
So strategies.
Yeah, strategies, exactly. What are some strategies there?
Okay. So, birthday parties, what a nightmare, right? If you have a food sensitivity. Just you're 5 years old and you're going to a birthday party and you're that one kid that can't have the cake, or that, the parent, as a parent, I've been in the position where it's like, oh no, they're all going to have those red popsicles, and that's not, a natural, that's not a natural red. That's like a supernatural red. So, what can you do? That's
not eating the rainbow, is it?
No, that is not eating the rainbow. I think that what we do is we just try and pre-pack treats so that my daughter doesn't feel left out. when she goes to birthday parties, we just take something that she really enjoys that feels indulgent, but that isn't laden with kind of wheat and refined sugar and food dyes. So I think that, being a little bit organized in that regard would be powerful. And I think that most kids would be fine with that.
What are some of the stuff that you make that is fits into that category of a treat, but is not having the inflammatory foods?
So we'll do some muffins, with coconut flour, almond flour. We don't have nut allergies in our home. You could do like strawberries dipped in, dark chocolate, or you could even do Jello from gelatin from grass-fed cows with some really delicious fruit juice, like sour cherry juice. Those are some of the things that we do. You could even do bananas dipped in chocolate, kind of like the banana pops. You could make your own popsicles with coconut milk and maybe maple syrup. So, and honestly, online, if you get on the interwebs and in the blogs, you'll find a lot of really great recipes, because there are a lot of families that are dealing with, kids that are, off casein and off eggs and off gluten and, trying to navigate that world. Yeah. And it's not as daunting as it used to be.
Well, that's a great point, because, in the past, this is another part of the evolution of medicine. In the past, when it came to health, the only people who knew anything were doctors, and you had to go and seek their assistance to do anything. And now there's this huge, doctors don't know anything about nutrition really, as a general rule. But now there are zillions more ways to be able to get this information. There's really been a democratization of this information, or some would probably call it a commercialization of this information across the internet. But the information is available to you now, and you, with not a lot of effort, there are lots and lots of people out there who are making it their business to put these ideas and recipes and fun things on there. So, right. Maybe one of the best things that you can do is actually sort of start to engage with things online, because I know my wife gets inspiration of stuff she wants to make on Pinterest.
Absolutely.
And all these kind of things. Yeah. So that could be a good starting point for a mom, is just like engage with a few of these things, find some good ones. What are some of your favorite ones that you see? I know both of us write for Mind Body Green. That always has some good stuff on there. Is there some more kid-focused sites that you look at?
No, I think Mind Body Green has a lot of good stuff. I agree with you. I use Pinterest a lot. I think that kind of with this whole DIY movement, we've taken kind of doing DIYing things like furniture and home renovations into our hands, and now it's more about DIY, like your food, and so I get a lot of my great kid ideas from Pinterest, honestly, and that can take you to a bunch of different blogs, and then you can kind of favorite those. Yeah. But I would say that like Alana's Pantry is really good, because it's it's good for anyone with kind of dairy allergies and gluten allergies. And I think even egg and grain allergies is a good one. And there's a lot of great books that are coming out. I mean, I feel like every couple of weeks there's another wonderful cookbook that's coming out. One thing that you told me that I heard you say probably 2.5 years ago, James, was that what was missing in medicine was empowerment, and that what you wanted people to be able to provide to patients was empowerment medicine. And I would agree with you that, if you're a physician out there and you want to change your practice and you want to help your patients make these changes, to really hop on this empowerment medicine bandwagon. And if you're a parent or if you're a patient, that you should also jump on the train. It's, it's your body, it's your story. You know yourself better than anyone else, and even better than blood tests, and better than, the science that exists. So if you can listen to your own wisdom, that's the most powerful tool that you have.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you there's two things you need to know about this train. One is that there's plenty of room for doctors and patients on it. And two, as Huey Lewis would say, you really don't need a credit card to ride it. I mean, you really just need to be able to get onto the internet and start to see what other people are doing, because that's another beauty of this thing, is that you can start to engage with all of this for free right now at any point. And that's got to be a huge process. And I see that doctors like yourself who curate resources for patients rather than just sort of telling them stuff. I mean, you're
Right.
busy enough even in your hour, never mind hour and a half, but any doctor could start curating, these resources for their patients and say, hey, go to Alana's kitchen, get some
Right.
recipes, put them together. Like, that's probably a much more valuable use of 15 seconds out of your 7 minutes than just
Yes.
saying, well, you can get, just trying to do it all yourself.
Yeah, you don't have to recreate the content. You can. There's a lot of wonderful resources out there.
Yeah, exactly.
And one thing I wanted to mention, James, is that for those of us that are kind of starting this process, from the beginning and going at it, it's an intimidating process. There's a steep learning curve, kind of coming out of this very processed world into trying to eat clean and, make better choices. But what I would say is that, my grandmother lived to be 103 years old, and she was an amazing woman, but she lived a very simple life. And I mean, the tenets were very simple. She ate clean food. She'd never ate out of packages. She ate vegetables and fruits and clean meats. She ate broth. That was the basis of, all the porridges and, kind of soups, the soups that were part of her diet. She moved around a lot. She walked everywhere. She actually never learned how to drive. She lived in Cuba till she was 55 and then came to the United States in Miami and lived in Miami for, the last half of her life. But, she never learned to drive, so she walked everywhere. She spent a lot of time outside. She spent a lot of time appreciating nature, looking at the marvelous world that we live in, appreciating the sunset or, the beauty of a flower or, of a leaf. She also spent a lot of time in community. She volunteered every single day until she was 95. From the age of 55 to 95, she volunteered every single day and just, she was with people. She helped people. She belonged to kind of a group of people and provided, service to others. And then she just, didn't live a very stressful life. She wrote poetry and crocheted and, really kind of embodied what I consider a profoundly, powerful and simple way of living. And she had her share of hardships, living a whole century. She had a lot of hardships, but she was healthy and she was well and she always lived simply. And I think everything's just gotten so complicated in our day and age.
Yeah, that's simplicity is huge. So, given what you just said, we've spoken a lot about diet and changes and cooking and making food. Let's talk about other things that families can do together in order to make significant change. And maybe we could look at the other different causes of chronic disease. Stress, toxicity, and immunity.
Mm-hmm.
With the microbiome and the immunity, obviously, they're all tied in together to a certain level. But you mentioned being part of nature and getting into nature together. I'm sure that's something that you can definitely do as a family, or can happen easily. I saw a thing recently that said that sleep issues could be significantly improved by going camping, because then you
go camping.
You get the circadian rhythms. There's a lot of value to that. What are some other strategies that families can use to sort of cut down on toxicity and stress and impoverished microbiome?
I think as far as kind of getting the toxins out, if you going on that DIY kick, get all your, harsh chemicals out of your home, dispose of them responsibly, and then have DIY projects where you make your own household cleaners and, maybe your own personal products. There's another great website called Wellness Mama, and she's very well known as well. And she's got all sorts of great DIY like shampoo and toothpaste and lotion. So all sorts of things that, have fun together as a family. Do these experiments, make things, it's a great learning process for your children. And your final result is that you get, a non-toxic product that you can use in your home. And also on that tangent is that to improve your microbiome and to eat more probiotic foods, instead of taking a supplement, which a lot of us do need probiotic supplements, and I do think that they can be very useful. But learn to ferment your own food as a family. Learn how to make your own kombucha. these are all skills that you can teach your children and that they can carry on in their life as they grow, and then they can teach their children. So, these are all things that were passed down from generation to generation at one point. And then, I think what happened is, post World War II, we just forgot a lot of that wisdom with, industrialism, with, the boom of processed foods and packaged foods. So I think that if we reclaim that wisdom and then we can, teach it to our children and they can teach it to their children, what is more powerful than that? And then I would just say, find a community, make friends, get off the iPhone, get off the iPad, get outside, go play, go run, go laugh. Being outside is really, really great for decreasing stress. I tell a lot of my patients that, your body doesn't know the difference between a lion chasing you and, truly being in danger or just feeling like you're in danger. And a lot of us kind of deal with this chronic stress, and our body physiologically doesn't know how to distinguish between the two. So, doing things that are more centering and calming and, breathing together, deep belly breathing, or, taking time to be grateful for, your life as a family, saying your gratitudes, things like that can be, that are very simple, but are very profound and they're very healing.
Seems like food, again, is another way to be able to do that because, it's the one thing that you're sort of doing consistently throughout the day. You're doing it every day. So it's a nice stopping point to be able to be thankful for where the food is coming from, or to relax a little bit about, take some deep breaths. I can just hear people at home thinking, well, when are we all going to get together and do some deep belly breathing? Is it all going to be, around Game of Thrones on a Sunday night? Or is it, that's not probably the best time to do it, but food is consistently, is 3 times a week, and you can 3 times a day.
3 times a day.
And you can get some good momentum into the system. So it does seem that that's a good consistent time to be able to bring some of those things in.
And have a conversation and talk about what's going on in your life. And I think what happens kind of in our modern society is that it's like, okay, we have 5 minutes to eat before we go on to the next activity, that's been planned and scheduled in. And I think that's where we fall short. And I think that if you look in other cultures, if you look in Europe, you look in, other places in the world, people still take a lot of, some people take a lot of time to enjoy their meals and to talk and to digest and to, kind of converse. And there's a lot of power in that. You build community, you nourish yourself through food, but, you also nourish yourself through conversation and you take a break in your day. So, and again, I agree with you that this eating thing is pretty central to our life and can be very powerful to us in many different ways.
Yeah, so true. So, you're a doctor and we're talking about the evolution of medicine. Not a lot of what we've spoken about today is medicine, but it's all really the evolution of medicine. So let's just say, look out to some time in the future where families get this, the mum's taking control, the whole family are operating, trying to reduce these causes of chronic disease and are looking after themselves. In that situation, what is now the role of physician in this evolution of medicine?
I think that the physician-patient role I think it's a very powerful, sacred role. I think that it can be potentially. I think that a lot of times it's not. But I think that I guess as a mom and as a doctor, what I would say is that, from the mother side or even from the patient side, if you can be empowered and educated enough to make these changes for your family, your physician really just becomes, your support system. Yes, obviously there's a lot of schooling and wisdom and knowledge that physicians do still have. So I do think, but I think that the relationship should be one of, almost collegial, of 2 individuals that are coming together to work as a team, to propagate health, and to, the physician's role is really to support the patient or the family to finding health and to sustaining health. And it's not, I don't think it should be like that kind of traditional patriarchal system where it's like, well, I said that you should do this and this is what you should do. It's like, well, patient comes in and says, well, I think that maybe I should do this because this is happening. And the physician should really engage in that and say, well, yeah, I think that there's something to that. Why don't we try that? And why don't we also try this? Because this is, the literature showing this, or, I think it's really got to be a team sport.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that today, and I think that's a great vision for the future. And I think if everyone plays their right role, then we can make some serious change here in a short order. So for those people at home who sort of are wondering about you and what you do, I know that you have some pretty interesting projects coming up later this year that might be of interest to people who are interested in making this sort of, these changes moving forward. Do you want to share a little bit of that before we wrap up here, Alex?
Absolutely. So I think the biggest kind of thing that's on the horizon is my Nourished Foundations program, where I really take people kind of step by step through making the simple and profound lifestyle changes that can be very daunting, but once you kind of get the hang of it, or can become rote. So that is kind of going to be an online course that it's going to be launching, or that's going to be launching very soon. So I would encourage anyone to check that out. If you need support and you want to make those changes, we're going to have a lot of cheat sheets and a lot of lists, and just a lot of kind of simplified, curated information and resources for people that want to make those profound changes.
Great. Where can they find out more about that?
On my website, which is nourishmedicine.com.
Beautiful website as well, can I just say. So one last thing, Alex, we've got a couple more minutes here. This is called the Evolution of Medicine Summit. We've been speaking today about the family unit as a sort of a resource and a driver of sustainable change. What are is there anything else that you'd like to add on sort of the concept of the evolution of medicine outside of what you've spoken about that really, that you're passionate and excited about here?
I guess in the last, few years, what I've really kind of come to is that the evolution of medicine is not so much, it's yes, we're moving it out of kind of this paradigm that we're stuck in from the last 50 years. But I really believe that if we look back, 3 or 4 generations, there's a lot of old school wisdom that has been lost. And I think that part of what we need to do is reclaim that. And I think the science is catching up now to all of those things that people used to do that maybe they didn't know scientifically why they did do, but they did anyway because they just were good observers of nature or of their bodies. And I think that part of that is fermenting food and spending time outdoors. And I honestly think it's very simple. And I think that the neat thing right now is that technology allows us to have a wider audience and a wider community of support. You can get on Facebook groups or meetup groups so that you can meet people that are like-minded and that are also kind of trying to make these sustainable changes. And you can also educate yourself. So I think that a lot of it's going to come from empowerment, but I think that we should also look back at the wisdom of our elders, and look at the wisdom of the generations before us. Yeah. Because I truly think that there's really a lot of good stuff there that we've forgotten.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of it, and that's evolutionary. You can't just miss out you can't just, not honor what's come before. So I think that's a great piece, and thank you for sharing that. So this has been Dr. Alejandra Carrasco. Her website is nourishmedicine.com. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this today. I really feel like this is something very valuable, and whether you're a physician trying to get more out of the patients in the time between your office visits, whether you're a patient listening to this and saying, hey, I think we could make some greater progress as a family, or engaging the family unit, or a community generally. It doesn't really even have to be family, but I think that what you've shared today is that there's so much dynamics, so many dynamics within the family that make it a great vehicle for sustainable change. I really appreciate you being on to the Evolution of Medicine Summit, and we look forward to following the next steps in your career and what you're bringing forth with a lot of excitement. So thanks so much, Dr. Carrasco. It's been great having you on here.
Thank you so much, James.
We'll be in touch soon. This is the Evolution of Medicine Summit. This is Dr. Alejandra Carrasco. I'm your host, James Maskell, and we'll see you at the next talk. Thanks for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of the talks today, and we'll be in touch soon. Thanks a lot.